Hello, good morning. It's such a wonderful day today here in Bonn, and I decided that, we've passed the new year, and it is time. It's almost late actually to talk about the best books of 2021, but I think, no, it's never late for a good book, right? So today I'm going to talk about the best books that I read last year. And perhaps you might, find something for yourself. I have to put a little disclaimer here because, as you probably know, I study art history. I'm writing a PhD in art history about contemporary art specifically, and of course some of the books I read and I appreciate just because it is useful for my studies. So I think you have to keep it in mind because maybe some of the books are not suitable for you, or maybe you just don't need to read them. But of course I have a couple of books that are just great. Universally, they are great for everybody, and I'll talk about them, of course, at the very end of this video. And I'll begin my little top list from the first book, which is Biography, published in 2020, and I've read it in the beginning of the last year, 2021, and it's a biography of Andy Warhol by Blake Gomnick. Seriously, this is such a fascinating read. First of all, it begins strikingly. It captivates your attention from the very introduction, and then it leads you through the whole life of one particular person. And I really enjoyed how this author writes about his life, his fellow artists, and just the whole world surrounding him. I have to admit, I am familiar with Andy Warhol's story. Because I used to, I've read actually the whole diary of Andy Warhol published after his death, and I also read, for example, The Philosophy of Andy Warhol from A to B, and I think it's called like that. So I've read something from him. Of course, I adore his art. I've been to his museum in Pittsburgh when I was in the States. So it was, I am familiar with this artist, and I just, wanted to see his overall story, and that was a great book. I'm sure there are many of biographies of Andy Warhol, but it has a lot of advantages, and I made a lot of notes, as you might notice. So I would recommend to read it. It's a great example of a well-written biography. And in the same manner, I'll continue with another biography, but this time it's a quite famous woman, Susan Zantok, Her Life and Work by Benjamin Moser. And as you can see on the cover, it's a winner of the Pulitzer Prize, which also quite understandable because it's great in-depth research of her life and her peers, people around her, and I really enjoy that. You might assume that it's not relevant to my studies. However, when you're an art historian, you write about art, you write about the place of art in our society, and I think this is what Susan Sontag did. It's because of her against interpretation and her notes on camp that I wanted to learn about her more. Yes, she's a great woman. She's a role model, I think, for a lot of journalists or investigators, researchers, and just writers. And that was a well-written, brilliant biography by Benjamin Moser. Really enjoyed that. And the next book that I want to present to you is, I have to admit, I didn't finish that. I haven't finished that yet, but I definitely will. And it's Bible. And I got specifically this edition of the New Oxford Annotated Bible. The reason that I got there is actually it was recommended for a Yale online course. You can find it on YouTube actually. It's just fascinating. So the Yale course offers two actually courses. One is on Old Testament and another one is on New Testament, and I went through both of them, greatly enjoyed that. And so the idea was, so actually I've began this journey in 2020. I watched the whole course on Old Testament, and then I went through the New Testament. And for me, that was also a new experience because it was my first time when I read it in English. I'm sorry, and of course, it is a new language, new vocabulary for me, and it is very helpful for art historian students, I believe. It doesn't matter in which language you read it. You can just pick it up, in your native language. And the thing is that because a lot of artworks, art pieces are related to Bible, so they've got a lot of plots from the Bible or characters, or some moral questions. They raise them even in contemporary art. And of course I wanted to learn more. And talking about religion, I also got this beautiful edition of Stephen Fry Mythos. I think it's quite famous. So Stephen Fry is explaining famous Greek myth in a very simple language, and I really enjoyed that. So I actually got a couple of other books on mythology, Greek mythology, and Roman mythology, but I think this is like very a clear copy. Like you can understand everything when you read it, and it's witty also, quite with a sense of humor, and yeah, I really like that. I would recommend it to anybody actually, not just an art historian students. So the next book I want to talk about that's a heavy thing. It is a book called Great Women Artists. It's just a collection of little essays on different female artists throughout the 400 years of art history. Many of them are contemporary, which I appreciated. So each page is dedicated to one artist, a female artist. They give a short biographical description and artwork, perhaps one of the most famous artwork, or just the most important, or just any artwork that they got access to, I guess, because of the copyrights, obviously. I think and I believe that this book should be in every art historian's on every art historian's bookshelf. And another book that I included in my top list is The Secret Lives of Color by Cassia Sinclair. And I think, well, first of all, let's appreciate this edition. It's a hardcover with this little colorful dots. So beautiful. It's a book about the colors. Surprise, surprise. And each page is dedicated to one of the colors. And she introduces us to the history of the color, how it was invented or how it appeared in our lives, and why it is called like that, where it is used, and where you can find it, where you can see it, where you can see it in nature, and etc., etc. So this is such a beautiful gift for anyone who is, erudite and wants to learn more. And it is especially good for example, linguists, for art historians, obviously, and for other people, of course, true researchers, art historians who dedicate their time into history of colors. They will dive into each color in depth, and there's a bunch of literature on every shade in every color. But I think as an overview, as a basic information on color, that should do it. I greatly enjoyed that. It was really nice experience, and because of the edition is so beautiful, seriously, I encourage you not to save money on the paperback in this case, because it's just fascinating. And it looks great on the shelf. The book that I want to present to you is, I don't have it on my hand because I read it in the library. So I came there to investigate on Donald Judd and minimalism in general, and I found this beautiful copy of this book. It is called The Longing for Less by Kyle Chaika, and oh my god, I I actually spent the whole day in the library just reading this book, and I started and finished it in like one sitting. And that is a collection of different stories, artists and makers that tell you the history of the movement. And so first of all, the author notice that there is a huge demand on minimalism, and it's has its reincarnation in 21st century. However, the whole idea of minimalism, of less is more, appeared in the 20th century, and he explores this history and people who were who were part of this movement. And well, I really liked it a lot. One of the most interesting things that I found in this book is the information about Julius Eastman. It was a pioneerist in the 20th century. He didn't live a long life, unfortunately, but he was also part of this minimalistic movement. He was, he was a musician basically, and he wrote one of the greatest pieces that I've ever heard. I would never actually characterize it as a minimalistic music. However, again, I'm not a specialist in music. And you can actually find his records, some of his recorded compositions on YouTube, and I encourage you and recommend it greatly because it's just fascinating. It's worth your time, definitely, and it's worth to dive into his biography a little bit more because I think people should know about this person, and I find his story just captivating. So yeah, and let's also talk about the couple of books that are actually non-fiction, and this is basically the top of my list. And let's begin with the Russian classics. So one of the greatest novels of all times that I've read last year was War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. Obviously, I got like 2 books of this novel, and let me explain why I find it very important for historians and art historians as well to read it. Well, if you're familiar with this novel, you might have seen the movie or the TV show. I greatly enjoyed, for example, the BBC series War and Peace. I can recommend it. It's fun. And the idea is, of course, to tell the story of several families and how they interact with each other throughout the history of great wars, Napoleonic Wars, and specifically 1812, when there was a culmination of Russians participating in the Napoleonic Wars. And as you might understand, it's a historical roman. It's a historical novel, and but what's really interesting and what I found the most important part for me personally was the third the third book of War and Peace, because it was almost the whole book is dedicated to the philosophy of history and historical determinism. And this is what I found fascinating. I think every historian should read that in order to understand how we perceive history. And obviously Tolstoy is challenging this notion, is that how we actually understand past? Can we actually understand it? Or is it not possible? So these all ideas are just great, so great. I really like that, and that's why it's obviously on the top of my list. It's one of my favorite books of all times. I have to admit, and I cannot wait when I reread it and maybe find something new for myself, however old the story. Yeah, and the next book that I also wanted to share with you is the Autumn by Alice Smith. I'm sure everybody's familiar with this book. It is quite famous and quite popular. I think it was the first book of the series. So Alice Smith, she wrote like 4 books, and it's called Autumn, one winter, one spring and summer. The autumn of 2021, I've read this book, and it is now in my top list. So basically, what Alice Smith did is she took the story of Pauline Boty. It was one of the first pop artists in Great Britain, and it means that one of the first pop artists in the whole world. And she intertwined it with the life of her characters in the book. You basically kind of introduced to the story of the artist and learn about her, of course, through the characters of the book. I have to also tell you that the whole series is autumn, winter, spring, and summer were written after the Brexit, and it's also kind of a new literature of the new era for the Great Britain, and I cannot wait to continue with the series, as I already said, and I'm sure the rest of the books are also so great. I like that there is also on the last page the painting from Pauline Boty, and yeah, I think it's Marilyn Monroe, yeah, quite iconic. And the first place in my list and the best book of 2021, in my personal opinion, is Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee. And the reason why I like that so much is because I find it very relatable to my own story and my own family, my own heritage. And usually I don't cry when I read books. Well, it only happened a couple of times. One was when I was reading A Little Life, obviously, and I think that was like the second time when I was crying. And that was kind of embarrassing because I was on my way to Russia and I was sitting in the airport and I was crying like a baby. So yeah, but I didn't care anyways. So the thing is that it explores the story of one family from the south part of South Korea, from Busan, or from like a small island in the south. And well, this was like probably the first signal why it is so relatable to me, because my Korean family is originally from the south of South Korea, and then we go through the colonization of Korea by Japan, and then through the wars, and then through the new economics and new challenges, through globalization and different, and we meet other Koreans outside of Japan or South Korea or North Korea. We just, meet all Koreans. We realize how many of them, and I felt like finally the story of the whole nation depicted through the history or story of one family finally is spoken. Well, I'm really sorry if it's not the first time. I don't know any books like that. If you know anything, if you know any book that are similar to this, I would be grateful if you write it in the comments, and I will read it definitely, because I am very interested in the subject, obviously. And so after reading this book, I thought, oh my god, what if my history, the history of my family, is actually more tragic than it is presented to me as a child? And it really inspired me to learn more about my family, to investigate my past, to go to archives, and to include my current family in this investigation. So it did a lot of it seeded a lot of thoughts in my head, about me personally and about the best of my family. Honestly, I never thought about it. I knew where I'm from. I knew who were my ancestors, but I never paid much attention to it. But then I realized how it is, it's a linear story. It's from one family, its story continues with another member, with a new member, and it continues with in the new times. And I think it has changed me a little bit, and this is what I really appreciated the books. This is what make them the best books in your life. And I think this is all that I want to say. It's actually quite hard to talk about this book. I don't know why. Probably because, it left me a bit devastated. And I can't wait to reread it. I'm sure I will reread it, maybe even this year. I don't know. But it will happen sometime, definitely, because it's a great book, and it's well written. It's so easy to read, easy to follow the story. I'm not gonna cry. So yeah. So yeah, guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you'll pick some of the books for yourself and read it in 2022. Let's just continue with the books, with the life, with some art. I'll see you around, and have a nice day. Bye.